Welcome to a special edition of the Raice Brothers podcast in honor of our holy Zaidi, the Ropshitzer Rebbe, R Naftali Tzvi. And on his yahrtzeit, we're going to talk about a little bit about his life and some stories that really get us going, and maybe some ideas that he brought out. So the yahrtzeit is Yud Aleph Iyar, Hoyche Benetzach, and we are super stoked to be talking about the Ropshitzer, who is one of the most interesting, confusing, complicated tzaddikim, and coolest and funniest at the same time. So Yehuda, maybe start us off with a little bit about his life.
L'chaim to the holy Ropshitzer, l'chaim to my holy brothers.
L'chaim
out there.
To the Zaydis, chusi again a little bit.
Amen. So Reb Naftali Tzvi of Ropshitz. Reb Naftali Tzvi of Ropshitz was the son of Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Linsk. He was born on the day of Shavuos. I'm sure you guys, that triggers something for those of you that know that the Baal Shem Tov was nifter on the first day of Shavuos. So mamish, as the Baal Shem Tov's soul ascended, the holy Ropshitzer's soul descended, and he came into this world.
Was it the same year?
The same day.
Year.
The day.
Same day.
Same day. Mamish, according to the tzaddikim, say it was mamish the same time. There were even many tzaddikim that, we'll get to maybe when we do his life story, but some tzaddikim that would say about the Ropshitzer. I remember who it was. I think it was a Sar Shalom of Bells, and he was with maybe Rabbi Cheskel of Shinav, and one of them was talking about like the greatness of the Baal Shem Tov, and the other one said, but the Ropshitzer, isn't he as big as the Baal Shem Tov? So like, they mamish held of the Ropshitzer, many held of the Ropshitzer as being like mamish incredibly high. The Ropshitzer comes from incredible yichus. We'll see a lot of interesting stories with that as well. The yichus that he comes from, from his father's side, Rabbi Menachem Mendel was a huge tzaddik, and his grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Yokel, and a long line of tzaddikim. They were the Reuben side. From his mother's side, Rebbetzin Bela, she in her own right was a big tzaddikis, and she knew a lot. She's even brought down in the Ropshitzer Svarim and in many other people's Svarim with questions and Tirelach. She was known as a Baki in Chazal, wild. And from her side, her father was Rabbi Itzkel of Hamburg, who was huge. And from that side, they come from the great Horowitzes, the holy brothers Reb Shmelka and Reb Pinchas, known as the Reb Pinchas, the Hamakna, the Hafla. Everybody knows him. The holy city of Brody, lions of the city of the Klois in Brody. And they trace it back to Rabbi Shaya Ish Horowitz, Rabbi Shaya Alevi Ish Horowitz, known as the Holy Shla. They trace it back further to the Holy Ramah and all the way back to Shmuel, and they say that this comes from the family of Kahas ben Levi. The Baal Shem Tov is quoted as saying that this is one of the three families among all Klal Yisrael that has a completely pure and untainted lineage throughout all the years of history. So we're talking about like, he was very proud of his yichus, the holy Ropshitzer. And the Ropshitzer as a kid, he was very sharp. He was a wise guy. He got busted for crawling under the table by his malamed, tying the kids' tzitzis to the benches. And when he got busted, he just yelled like, "What do you want? You're not even saying good Torah anyway, because there's a Tosfos and Ksubas that Mamish says lehepech of everything that you're saying. So like, what do you want from me?" So he was very sharp. He was a wise guy. One time his father turned to him as a kid, and he said, "What's with you? You're wasting your time." He was about 5 or 6 years old. Like, you're wasting your time. You're not davening, learning. So he says, "What do you want? To have a Yetzer Hara?" So he goes, "Adarabba, you should learn from the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara is constantly there and constantly doing his avodas Hashem by not trying to get you to stop doing avodas Hashem the whole time. He's going crazy, and he never lets up for even for a minute." And the little Reb Naftali looks up and he goes, "Yeah, that's because he doesn't have a Yetzer Hara stopping him." So he was quite exciting. We're going to jump through just quickly through his life. There's a lot that we're going to talk about, but today we want to just jump into a couple different stories. He was connected to tzaddikim in the world of Chassidus from a young age. He learned by his father. He learned by his grandfather Reb Itzkel. He learned by many others. He actually learned in yeshiva with the holy Nesivos, well known, from the Ktsais in the Sivas. And
His family were Hasidim?
his family was open to Hasidus. Yeah, his father brought him to.
No, his father was a Misnagid. His mother brought him into Hasidus.
Right, but they was open. Like his father brought him to Rabbi Chil Michal of Zlatchev at 13 to put on tefillin, and his father also went to Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Rimenov, like he was also known to frequent there. They weren't misnag. I don't think they were misnagdim, but I don't think they were as farbrent. He went to Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk at 17. And yeah, it's actually a very interesting story. Sorry, not at 17, at 16. At 16 he made it, and at 27, Rebbe Elimelech passed from this world. The holy Ropshitzer was known. He made himself many Rebbes. He had his primary Rebbe was Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhensk. When Rebbe Elimelech passed on, he made himself. They call it the Three Fathers. It was the holy the Chayzer, Rabbi Yaakov Yitzchak, the Chayzer of Lublin. Rabbi Ropshitzer Magid. What would you say?
Go ahead. Sorry.
And Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Rimenov. Those were his three main rebbes. But he mamish made everybody into his rebbe. He spent a year by Rabbi Mordechai of Neshchez. He was by many. He was by the Oyev Yisrael. He was all over the place. He held. It says in Pekei Avos, Aselech Harav. He said you got to make yourself Raice Beis Rabbanim. You have to have 202 Rabbanim. Just like he made everybody into his rebbe, and they all loved him because he was fiery. He had no patience for fools, absolutely none at all. He was quoted as saying, "I don't even want to be in Gan Eden if they sit me next to a fool." He had and he was nice to everybody. Like he gave covet, he gave respect, and he was able to manage the delicate courts of different tzaddikim, even ones that weren't so into each other. He had a subtlety about him and a sharpness that everybody liked. There was even, just to bring out a point, one time the Chayze, there was another one of the Rebbes, I don't remember which one it was, who started giving out kvitlach, and the Chayze heard about this. And the Chayze was very upset. So this other Rebbe reached out to Reb Naftali and said, "Can you go and talk to the Chayze for me?" So Reb Naftali,
you're talking about the Heilige Yid?
I don't think it was with the Yid, because with the Yid it wasn't glossed over as smoothly as this one.
Okay.
It was a lesser well-known tzaddik, and so he comes into the Chayze, and he says, what's his name? Yenim is a tzaddik. Like, what's your issue with him giving out kvitlach? So the Chayze says, well, what do you mean? I could see that he's not a tzaddik, and on the level to give out kvitlach. I see. You should be giving out kvitlach. So the Ropshitzer says, well, that's because he davens that you shouldn't see his greatness. So the Chayze says, yeah, and you don't daven that I shouldn't see your greatness? He goes, so the Ropshitzer says back, I see, that's why he deserves to be a Rebbe, and I don't really deserve to be a Rebbe. And the Chayze looks at him and goes, okay, Naftali. And he's like, okay, I'm good with it. And that was it. He was good with it. So we see that Reb Naftali had this, there was even, different gatherings that sometimes Reb Naftali didn't make it to. And Reb Mendel of Rimenov, there was a big gathering, and the government threw a bunch of the tzaddikim into jail. And I think it was with Reb Nachum Mendel of Rimenov was leading it. And so Reb Naftali had to go around and get them out of jail. It was a whole story. And afterwards, Reb Nachum Mendel was very upset at him. He goes, why didn't you come? Why weren't you there? You should have been there with us. And so Reb Naftali is like, well, then who would have gotten you out of jail? So those interesting stories, how he dealt with a lot of these different things. Anyhow.
It is interesting, though, that, often someone who is like the Ropshitzer, who was sharp and would say the truth, like he spoke the truth. He was straight up. At the same time, you're able to make peace because it's like when people know that you're going to speak the truth, they know also that if you're able to then connect the people properly because the people trust you. You gain a certain amount of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to kick it off with one short story. I was going to say you guys should take it away, but I'll kick it off with one short story. You guys will give me some feedback. This one's just such a good feel-good story. I love it. And also talks a little bit about, it gives you an idea of who he was hanging out with when he was young. So This was a young Reb Naftali, was in Lublin. I'm not sure if it was by Reb Elimelech at this point still, or if it was by the Chayzer, but it was young Reb Naftali, and he was there with Reb Yaakov Yitzchak, not the Chayzer, but the Yid HaKadosh, and the Holy Reb David of Lelev. And they're young chevra, and they were like looking to have like little feast, like sometimes you want to make a little suda, and they couldn't, they didn't have enough money to cover it. So there was this young guy, and his name was Aaron, and he was a young Avrech, and he's like, here, I'll throw down some money for the suda. So he throws down some money. They have a ishmak suda. You know how it is with your friends. Maybe you've had an experience like by Reb Shimon or by the Ropshitzer, his own kever, or maybe by Uman. But when you're with your friends and you're talking Torah, Nichnas Yayin Yitzchak, it was mamish. It was a good story. So Gewalt, like they had this great time. Years later, the Yid HaKadosh is running his own court, and then the Ropshitzer is king of Ropshitz, and Reb David of Lelev, he's rocking his world in Lelev, and they get together. They met up, and they were sitting together, and they're schmoozing, and they said, "Chavre, you remember that guy Aaron?" They're like, "Yeah, Ronnie. I remember that Ronnie. He threw down for that meal. It was Gewalt." So they said, "Where is he now?" So they all lean back, and they start going through it. They open their eyes. They go, "Anybody find him?" "No, can't find him. He's not in any of the shtiblach down here. None of the shtiblach upstairs." They close their eyes again, and they open their eyes. It goes, "I think we found him." They're like, "Yeah, oh man, what happened to him? He mamish lost it. He went off. He went nuts. He did all sorts of mentionable acts." And so they said, "I think we owe Ronnie a good one, huh?" So they're like, "Yeah." So they all leaned back and they started sending him some crazy Hurei Tshuva. They just blasted him in Gewalt. That was it. He mamish pulled him right out from wherever he was, and he did Tshuva Gemura. So you never know who's thinking about you right now. And you know something? Maybe if you're on the level, put out a little thought to someone else in the world. Chaim.
Chaim.
Yeah. Chaim, that's fantastic.
What do you got for us?
I'm going to jump in here for a second. I know that there's so many things that I've read over the years that really make me feel so connected to the Ropshitzer. I'm not known for my brevity though, and he was known for brevity. There's like a few stories that stick out in my mind about his brevity. Like there was one story where Erev Pesach, he comes home from shul after giving his big Shabbos HaGodol drasha, and his wife looks at him and she says, like, "What's wrong?" He's like, I gave this drasha today, whatever. And she's like, "And, how'd you feel about it?" He's like, "I feel like I got through 50%. The drasha was that there's, people need money on Pesach. So I got the poor people they are willing to accept money. The rich people, we'll see." There's another time that he stood up and he said, so one time he gets up, it was, I think, Shabbos Shuvah drasha. He stands up there and he's standing there and he's looking at the crowd for a while. He's looking at everybody. And then he says, "A worm of the earth is going to inspire you." And he walked off the bima, and they started finished davening. That was him, in a sense. Like, if you sense what's coming out of a story like that, that was the Ropshitzer. As few words as possible to have a big impact on whatever was going on. It was mamish gewalt. There was another story actually that was coming to my mind about his speeches. He says he used to say that there's, in order to get people, you have to have a very short speech. It has to be based on the parsha, and it has to have a good lesson. So he gets up and he says, I don't know what Sedra it is this week." Yeah. Well, I can't remember what the end of that was, but Yaakov, let me pass it off to you.
I don't remember that one either.
Oh, that was it. They say that was actually his first week in Ropshitz when he became the Rav of Ropshitz. He got up and he said that, like you said, it's got to be three things on the parsha: true and short. He goes, I don't know what this week's parsha is. It's short, it's true, and it's connected to the parsha.
Yeah, Gewalt.
It's funny because I was looking and there's so many stories about the Ropshitzer, which like he was he didn't hold of himself. He was very strong in his opinions, but at the same time he looked at himself as nothing, like literally, like Yehuda was saying before, and like you said with the worm story. And there's a couple of stories that are just he hit so hard. And like one time he was when he was already the Rav in Ropshitz, so you can imagine he's on the level. You know, he took the job, so obviously he's good enough to do it. But anyway, so he used to walk sometimes at nights in the evenings or early morning. He used to walk in the outskirts of the town and the fields, and going and doing his thing. And one time he's walking out there late at night, and he bumps into one of the watchmen who are out there to guard the orchards or guard the fields. And so he says, who are you working for? So he tells him, this guy, that guy. And he says, who are you working for, Rabbi? And the Ropshitzer like just stopped, and he was just in shock. The words just hit him like a ton of bricks. Who are you working for? He's thinking, oh my. And he starts stammering, goes, I'm not working for anybody. I'm not working for anybody. And he starts walking back and forth. He's like, I'm not working for anybody. And he turns to the watchman. He goes, would you like to be my mishamash? He says, the guy says, of course, but what do you want me to do for you? He says, I just want you to remind me.
Wow. Chills.
And there's a couple other stories like this. Like there's another one. It's a great one. Rosh said, says that tzaddikim who daven that anyone who has a tzara should be able to come to them so that they'll be able to help them. He says, but there's the rabbi of Ropshitz. He davens that Hashem should help all the people. They shouldn't be deluded in thinking that some rabbi helped them.
Yeah.
That was him.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's funny. He used to say that in faraway places, he's known as Reb Naftali from Ropshitz. In the town of Ropshitz, he's known as the Rebbe of Ropshitz. In his house, I'm known as Naftali. He says, my wife, she knows me the best.
Yeah.
One time, somebody asked him that it says that Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu dar v'darshav, every generation, and its guides, its leaders. So he said, why did Hashem show Moshe Rabbeinu the generation and only then the leader? He should have showed him the leader first and then the generation. So he says, Moshe Rabbeinu, his face was like the sun. Yeshua was like the moon. Every generation gets a little bit less, the radiance. Says the Rebbeinu Shalom would have come along and showed them Naftali. Moshe Rabbeinu would have passed out. What? So he says first he had to show them the generation. He could show them such a generation. Even Naftali could be a rabbi.
Well, it's funny when he said that. I mamash thought of the same story. Wild. Yeah, he was also known for getting others with this. There was one time there was a guy who was quite full of himself, and so Reb Naftali went over to him and said, "No, what are you working on?" So the guy said, "I'm working on bittul. I'm trying to work on realizing that I'm mamish nothing." He goes, "Wow, that's so interesting because I've been working my whole life to finally become something."
It's like, what do you have to work so hard on, buddy?
Yeah, mamish gewalt.
On the other hand, he also had a very sensitive side to him. There's a beautiful story that shows his sensitivity. He had two Talmidim who were best friends, like beloved to one another, David and Yonason. And they used to come to eat with the Rebbe, the Ropshitzer. And every time, sometimes when you bake the rolls, sometimes they stick together. So every time these guys would come to him for the meal, he would give them 2 rolls that were stuck together. One week, these guys had a little falling out, and they weren't so happy with each other, and they came to the Ropshitzer for the meal as usual, and he gave them separate rolls. And they looked at one another, they started crying, and they turned to each other and they go, I'm sorry. It's my fault. I shouldn't have done that. And the other one at the same moment turns to me and goes, I'm so sorry. It was really me. I shouldn't have said what I said to you. And they just hugged each other and started crying. And the next meal, again, the Ropshitzer gave them the connected bilkelach.
Wow. The craziest thing, I read this story about these 2 friends that were looking for a Rebbe. And I wonder if it was maybe these 2 guys. So they showed up at the Ropshitzer, and they mamish, they were looking, they're looking for a Rebbe. And at the same time, some other guy comes in, and he has this whole letter. And he comes into the Ropshitzer, he goes, Rebbe, he goes, I did so many averos, but I went to this other Rebbe, and he gave me this whole list of things that I need to work on, and I need to fix. He goes, maybe you can give me easier things. And the Ropshitzer looks at him, gives him a scathing look, and goes, what did God do to you that you did all these bad things to him? And the guy starts bugging out, and he goes, what, you think this list is long enough? He took it easy on you. And the guy just loses it and bursts into tears, and he's literally sobbing on the floor. His mama saw his whole life, he's sobbing on the floor. And suddenly these 2 guys start dancing. And they're dancing, and they're hugging, and they're laughing, and they're like, ah! And the Rav just looks and goes, what's wrong with you 2? You have no respect? These guys on the floor. And they look at him, and they go, we have a Messiah, that the only way that you can accept the Rebbe is if you could find someone who in one moment can mamish clean a person up from his whole life and give him such a kapara that he's ready to restart fresh, brand new. And goes, and we just found it. I'm sorry for him, but first of all, he's doing great, and this is going to be amazing. We found the Rebbe. And the Ropshitzer looks at them, and he looks back at the guy. The guy finally, after 15 minutes, picks himself up off the floor, and the Ropshitzer looks at him and goes, you're completely clean, bro. Go home and, live a good life. And so I wonder if it was these 2 guys. These 2 crazy fools. Gewalt.
Interesting. He never wanted to be. He didn't want to be a Rebbe, right? And they say that he didn't really accept himself as a Rebbe until after the Chayza and the Ropshitzer and Reb Mendel Rimanover, after they left the world. But I saw in one of the stories where it said that one of his students later on, he said, listen, you're going to be a big Rebbe. You have to give me a bracha. And he said, what, Rebbe, I can't give you a bracha. He said, let me tell you something. He said, when I was very young, I met Reb Levi Yitzchak Miberditchev. And Reb Levi Yitzchak asked me to give him a bracha. And I refused, and I refused, and I refused. And I regret it to this day. He said, I regret it. He said, it limited me. So I'm telling you that for your own sake, this is the time. Let it go.
Wow. I did, yeah.
So one thing that you see in all these stories is the uniting principle is that he was not into BS. He was very real, always real. Sometimes, real with humor, real with sharpness, real with sincerity, but very real. He couldn't handle sheker or being a faker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's another angle that we could share is he also did interesting things, and it took people a little while to catch him. And sometimes he was very sharp. There were tzaddikim that said that they never saw the Ropshitzer ever be mean to anybody. But there are definitely stories that you see that he was pretty sharp with people. But I think they got it, meaning, with love. But when the Ropshitzer, his son-in-law, Reb Asher Yeshaya Rubin, when he first married into the family, it took a little time to get Ropshitz. And at one time, the Ropshitzer comes into the kitchen. And as he enters into the kitchen, the Ropshitzer puts on this face, and he goes, I don't get it. I work hard around here. I don't deserve a little milk? Nobody can take care of me? A little milk? All the work that I do? I don't deserve it. And his son-in-law looks at him and he's like, what's wrong with him? Like, you don't talk like that to anybody, but these are the people that are working in the kitchen, like a little, And he's like, oh, I'm going to tell him off. Anyhow, a few minutes later, this woman comes in and she goes, Rebbe, I'm a poor widow and I have no money and I have little twins at home and I need milk for my kids. Can you please daven for me that I should have milk? So the Ropshitzer looks at her and says, don't worry, it's already been taken care of. Go home. You're going to be good. So the son-in-law forgot about what happened. He never got a chance to say anything to the Ropshitzer. But about 2 weeks later, the Ropshitzer again storms into the kitchen and he goes, so you give me milk, but it's like water. It doesn't give me chias. I don't feel good. And it doesn't make me put on weight. Nothing. Like I want good milk that is nutritious, milk that makes me feel good, milk that makes me. And this is it. Like his son-in-law is like, he's nuts. He's literally lost it. Like he has no respect. And a second later, though, this woman comes in and she goes, Rebbe, my kids, Baruch Hashem, now I have milk, but my kids, they're not putting on weight. They're scrawny, they're little. I need you. I need you to daven. Please daven to the Shekhinah. Beg the Shekhinah for me. And the Ropshitzer looks at her and says, the Shekhinah's already heard. Don't worry. Go home. It's already going to be good. At that point, it clicked in the son-in-law, and he began to chap what it means to Ropshitz.
Reminds
so
me
funny.
of
Go on, yeah.
there's a great story that's about one time when Reb Naftali was by the Chayzo, so he sees this chassid come out after having yechidus with the Rebbe, and he looks so dejected. So he goes over to him, he asks him, like, what's going on? He says, listen, I went and I needed a Yeshua, and I went to the Rebbe for a bracha, and he told me, I'm sorry, whatever, there's nothing I could do. He's like, I told him, I'm related to him. He's like, our grandfathers or brothers or cousins or something, whatever. And he, the Chayza, his response is like, weite krovim, distant cousins. So the Ropshitzer tells him, listen, when he's going to daven mincha, go up, stand behind him, and when he's davening the first bracha, he says, Elokei Avram, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov, just from behind, just say, weite krovim, distant relatives. So he goes up there, he does it, and the Chayza afterwards, he comes over to the guy, he says, I got you, but just tell me, was this one of Naftali's tricks?
Ropshitz!
Oh my gosh, a little crazy Ropshitzer.
So it's funny because you said the milk story, and there's a story about the Ropshitzer that one time on Yom Kippur, after Musaf, he was schmoozing with some chavra, and he says, I wish I could be reborn as a cow. What? Goes, yeah. All I want is I should give some milk and a yid will drink me before davening and feel refreshed and daven a good davening.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It goes in line with the story that you said before about him, davening that people should just be taken care of at home and not be fooled into thinking that it was him that did something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cow that gives milk. Yeah. All right. We don't thank the cow every time we drink milk, right? We thank Hashem.
Yeah.
That's true. Holy Ropshitzer.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you, though, some of the stories, I like the funny stories about the Ropshitzer. I think, Yehuda, you've told over, and maybe we'll just share the recording so people can go to it. We'll share it in the comments, the story of the Ropshitzer on the onions, which is definitely all-time favorite.
Yeah.
And, but I really would love to tell over the story of what happened after the Chayza passed away. This is one of my all-time favorite Ropshitz stories.
Yeah.
So with your permission, the Chayza passed away on Tisha B'Av. And so Motzei Tisha B'Av, the Ropshitzer went and changed clothing. He put on work clothing, and he wanted to go out to be involved in digging the Chayza's grave. So he put on work clothes and he grabbed a pick and a shovel, and he goes out to meet up with the Chaver Kadisha and the workers. And that night, it was a crazy summer thunderstorm. and it's pitch black. You can imagine before there was electricity, there's no lights, and at night it's dark. And when there's a thunderstorm, it's pitch black except for the occasional flash. Everything lights up, and then it's even darker than before. So it's a crazy summer thunderstorm night. The Ropshitzer goes out, and he sees they have a couple of laborers gathered together to go dig. And so before he even talks to the Chaver Kaddish, he goes over to the laborers. He gives them he pulls out a bottle of vodka, starts pouring some drinks to them, and he's making friends. He's schmoozing with the guys, and then he gives them a couple of rubles. He says, "Look, we're gonna get out into that mess." He says, "As soon as I find a spot that I want you to dig, I'm gonna give you a sign. You just start digging right away, okay?" And he's buddies with them at this point. He's like, "And I'll give you the other half. I'll give you the same amount of money. I'll give it to you when we're done. When we come back, I'll give you double." So no problem, pleasure, and they're enjoying him.
Yes.
Anyway,
mister.
at this the Rav of Lublin at that point was a big misnagid. It was he was known as the eyes in a cup, the Rosh HaBarzal, the Iron Head, because he was such a big lamdin Talmud Chacham, but he was not into the chozeh. There's other great stories about him and the chozeh back and forth. You know what? There's one quick one. One time he came to the chozeh, I just have to jump into
Story in a story. Yes.
Story in a story. My life is like a storybook story. Anyway. So
And the soundtrack.
one time the Eisen Cup tells the chayz, he's like, all these chassidim come to you. Why don't you tell them the truth, that you're really nothing, and you're not a rebbe at all, you're not a tzaddik at all, and they should stop coming to you. The chayz says, you're right, I should. So that Shabbos he gets up and he says, guys, I don't know why you're coming to me. I'm nothing. I'm lower than nothing. And I don't know what you come here for. I can't help you in any way. So all the Hasidim go, oh, wow, the Rebbe is such an anav. He's such an awesome Rebbe. The next week, so many more Hasidim come. Gewalt, what the Chayzer is the holiest. And the Eisen Cup sees this and gnashes his teeth. Oh, it didn't work. So, all right, I know what to do. He calls the Chayzer in and he goes to talk to him again. He says, you know what? So your Hasidim, they like that talk. Oh, you're such an anav. They're very into that. Why don't you go tell them how great you are and you're awesome, and then they won't come back to you and get rid of them, like, because they should, you and I know they shouldn't be coming to you. So Chayz says, look, he says, I might be nothing, but I'm not a liar. So anyway, the Eisen Cup calls, and the Chayz passes away. He calls in the head of the Chaver Kadisha, and he says, look, I want you to make sure these Hasidim are going to want to put the Chayza in a very, in a chush of a place in our holy city of Lublin with all the great tzaddikim. They want to find them a good place. I want you to shunt them off to the side, like out of the way. We're like, don't give them any good spots in our basic kvaros. It's okay, no problem. So he comes out there, and he's got his crew, and the Ropshitzer is there. Chaver Kaddish is like, the Ropshitz is here. Okay, fine. He says, what are you doing here? He says, it's my Rebbe. I want to be involved in burying. He says, okay, but no funny stuff. And they go out. And you can imagine, it's the big basic kvaros of Lublin, and it's pitch black and the pouring rain there. They're covered up in ponchos, and they have these little lanterns, and they're going out in the pouring, driving rain, trying to find a place to bury him. And the whole time, the Ropshitzer is just keeping up a pitter-patter. He's talking to the head of the Chaver Kaddish. He's like, who cares where we bury him? It doesn't even make a difference to me. This weather is crazy. Let's just find anywhere. It doesn't make a difference. Anywhere we find that's a decent spot, I don't care. We'll just bury him and get it over with. It's crazy out here. And he just keeps this, this conversation up the whole time. And they're looking around trying to find. It's very difficult, as you can imagine. All of a sudden, the Ropshitzer senses this is the spot. He feels it. He feels the Kedusha. Feels like this is the right place. Immediately, he gives a signal to the workers, to the laborers, and they start digging. And as he does that, he turns to the guy and goes, it doesn't matter to me where even here is okay, like even here. And they start digging, and the head of the Chaver Kaddish gets nervous. He's like, this trickster, I don't trust him. He starts looking around, going to the nearby kvarim, trying to see where are we exactly. They're totally lost. Suddenly he sees, they're right next to Reb Shachna of Lublin. Reb Shachna was one of the biggest Rabbanim of Lublin in the previous generation. And he goes, oh, no, this is the prime real estate. This is the best spot on the whole basic forest. He goes, no. He starts yelling at them to stop digging. And the Ropshitzer goes, what's the problem? He's arguing with them, and they're yelling at each other. And then meantime, these guys are just digging away. They want to get out of there and get the rest of that bottle of vodka and the rest of their money and go home. And they're digging away. And by the time, and before you know it, the grave is dug. They're still arguing. And they come back, and the head of the Chevra Kadisha comes into the Rav. He goes, I really messed up. I don't know what to do. He tells them the whole story. And the Rav says, the fact is, the halach is, I don't know if it's a halach or a minhag, but the way it is that once you dig a grave for somebody, that's where you bury him. He says, there's nothing we can do about it. And thus the Ropshitzer won again.
They say that it mamish fits because the holy Chayzer used to always tell people whenever they needed a Yeshua to go daven by Reb Shachna, because he said all the other tzaddikim in the basic verse already went to Eretz Yisrael. Reb Shachna is the tzaddik who stayed behind to protect the city of Lublin.
So he got buried exactly where he was supposed to.
Wow.
So sometimes, like Yaakov Avinu, got to know how to play the game. The Ropshitzer definitely knew how to play the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of one other, this guy who comes to the Ropshitzer, and he wanted a tikkun for a terrible avera, but he was embarrassed to say, this one is a famous, everyone knows the story. He was embarrassed to say that he did such an avera. So he comes in and he says, Rebbe, my friend, he did something wrong. He's embarrassed to come himself. So he asked me if I could come and ask the Rebbe, what's the tikkun for this avera? And the Ropshitzer looks at him, he says, your friend is a fool. He could have come himself and said he was coming for somebody else.
Your friend is a fool. Yeah, Gewalt. Abe, what do you got there for us?
Yo, what was that story you said you knew that about the only 3 times the Ropshitzer said that somebody bested him?
So one time was with his son when his son was very young. I think you said over the story about with the Yetzer Hara, where he asked his son something. Was also like the same story about with the Yetzer Hara, where he asked his kid,
right,
how come you're not doing this? And he said, oh, the Yetzer Hara, whatever. And he's like, but the Yetzer Hara is following what the Eibishter wants. He's doing exactly what it is. He says, well, what do you want? The Yetzer Hara doesn't have the Yetzer Hara. So that was one story. The second story was that he came to a city or a little town, and there was a shul with exactly 10. There's exactly 10 mispalim in the village, and there was a basic verse, a basic chaim over there. So he asked this girl in the street. He says, "I don't understand. You don't need both. If somebody dies, there's no minyan, so you could shut down the shul. And if everyone's alive, what do you need a basic chaim for?" So she said, the shul, everyone's going to be okay, but the basic chaim is for guests. It's for travelers, for anyone that's coming through.
Like you.
Yeah, that was one story.
Oh my God.
Or that's 2 stories. And then the last one was Simchas Torah. There was like a guy that came there who was never involved with anything. All of a sudden he shows up, Simchas Torah, he's dancing away. The guy is so happy. So the Ropshitzer goes over to him and says, what are you doing here? What's your shaychus with Simchas Torah? So the guy says, my dear Rebbe, if my brother makes a chasana, am I not going to come? Am I not invited? No, I'm going to come and I'm going to dance and I'm going to be involved as if it's my own simcha. Give out.
Bested the Ropshitzer. They say also there's a story with his wife. And there's a lot of stories with his wife. I mean, that's also something that we can go into. Interesting the Sarah about that. Like, the Ropshitzer actually had 2 marriages. His first marriage didn't last very long, very, very short. And
1 year, I think.
I
think it was 1 year.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was a year, but could be. I don't know. But the second wife was Gewalt. He was very happy with her, but she was quite sharp and strong and known for her sharpness. But one time she turned
acerbic wit.
Yes. Yes. So think about it. We have to get it. It's definitely an interesting discussion. I don't know if it's for today. What the deal is, with that and what was said. But one time she came over to him and she looked at him and she goes, "What's with you? You're making this bracha shalei asani isha. Who do you think you are? You're making a bracha that you're not a woman?" So he looks at her and he says, "My dear, lovely, amazing wife, we make a bracha that we're not the woman that has to live with me." Oh, good. Well,
that's a good
it's mamish.
answer.
Yeah. But that was the Ropshitzer also. He was always there. He was so on the ball with that.
Yeah.
I want to
I
share
wanted to share. I saw a little Torah today from the Ropshitzer. Very sweet. It says, right in Shema we say al mezuzos besecha, right? So he says, what's mezuzos? He says mezuzos. If you take the first letter is a mem, the last letter is a tov. Mem tov is mace. What's in the middle of the mem and the tov in mezuzos? Zayin vav. He says, what's the gematria of Zayin vav? 26. He says, when you have the Eibishter inside, then you're all right. It saves you from the death. If you're not connected to the Eibishter, you're lacking.
I like that one. Your mama.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So zoo. And as soon as he said that, I was thinking, what's zoo? Zoo Tyra, vizu schara.
Oh.
Who said that? Didn't they say that when the Malachim said that when Rabbi Akiva was dying?
Right.
I have no idea what the connection is, but zoo. This is Tyra and this is the schar for it, and that's gematria Yud Kei Vav Kei. I'm sure there's a meaning there. But you know what? We don't have the answer right now. We don't have to have it right now.
One of the things about Hasidim is that they were really which I think is part of the whole idea. It opens up a lot of panemius. Is the idea that they would always make these plays on words, recognizing play on words. Sometimes Yiddish to Hebrew to playing around even with the language of the times, the Polish, the Russian. They were very into playing it because this is kind of like the idea of making yichudim from different things, from recognizing playing around with things and creating new realities. So there's many stories about it, but there's one story that one time that when Reb Naftali was really young, he was by the Oyev Yisrael, the holy Reb Avram Yeshua Heschel of Apt. And so the Apt Rav was quite old at the time, and he was laying in his bed, and on the chair was Reb Nachum Mendel of Rimonov, and Reb Naftali was sitting on a stool, and they're sitting there schmoozing, and at some point the Apt Rav looks at the young Reb Naftali, gives him a little eyebrow look, and he goes, "Naftali, what did you think about that Mincha Erev Yom Kippur, huh?" And Naftali starts laughing. His mamish giggling away, and they're all three chuckling together. So afterwards, the Gabbai of Reb Mendel of Rimonov comes over to Reb Naftali and goes, "What was that about? Tell me." And he was a tzaddik also, this Gabbai. But so Reb Naftali is he's like, "Listen, I'm not asking the After Rav, and I'm definitely not asking Reb Mendel, my Rebbe. Tell me what was going on." He said, I'll tell you the truth. He goes, how there was this big plague that was been going on, and it's been really hurting the women, killing many women, especially pregnant women. He says, so there was this simple guy who never really davens, and he came into the big town for Yom Noraim, and it was Erev Yom Kippur, and they were all in shul, and he opened up a siddur, and he's barely making his way through Shmona Esrei, and he gets up to the bracha of Mevarech Hashanim, and he starts off and he sees it, and he's got it wrong. He sees the bracha is called Mevarech Hanashim, blessing the women, and he says, and the Yid mamish he never davens, and he's mamish having this high experience, and he's going, Hashem, ubarich nishaseinu, bless the women, kanashim atoivos, the good women throughout history, all the holy Jewish women, and he's crying, and he goes, Baruch ata Hashem mevarich hanashim. And Gewalt, the guy got the whole bracha wrong, but that bracha stopped the entire magefa. He goes, and so we all saw this because we've all been working to, like, all been davening to stop this magefa, and then this random guy just broke right through with his messed up bracha. You know, Gewalt. That's part of it. That's part of, like, you know, we never know, you never know.
That's it. I mean, that's like a classic Hasidic story because it's all about. It's at the Baal Shem Tov is always talking. It's Rahmana Li Babai. It's all about where you're coming from with sincerity and heart and being real. And even if you're being real is like, it could be humorous, it could be different, it could be not exactly what you should be doing, but if you're doing it for the right reason and you end up in the right place, and you win, man. Ropshitz wins again. And the howl went up in the city of Lublin. Ropshitz!
Yeah. They say one time, they say that howl, they say that Rebbe Elimelech of Lezhensk used to scream Ropshitz. And this was well before Reb Naftali ever became the Rav, but he would just scream, Ropshitz, what are you doing? They say one time he was hiding under the bed because he wanted to see what Rebbe Elimelech was going to, you know, how he davens Marav. And he puts Rebbe Elimelech puts the gartel around one time in Gebalt, the whole room fills with light. And like he puts it around the second time, finally, like Rebbe Naftali is like, stop, it's too much. And of course, Rebbe Elimelech rips up the bed and goes, Ropshitz, what are you doing? Get out of here. Yeah.
It's actually a trip. I always wondered about that story because, like, what was going on? Like, clearly the Ropshitzer wanted to know. I want to know, like, what was going on there that he went in. And in that story, the Rebbe of Mailach told him, like, if you would have been here one more time that I rapped that, you know, your neshama would have gone out. Right. Which actually reminds me of, I wanted to get into a little bit, like, the stories. There's two different versions of the story about what happened when he first came to the Rebbe of Mailach. One was that he comes to the Rebbe of Mailach, and the Rebbe of Mailach tells him, get out of here. I don't want anybody with yichus. I don't need yichus, you know, yichusin over here. And he looked at the Rebbe of Mailach, and he just threw himself on the floor, and he started crying, and he was just crying until he had like blood coming out of his mouth and his tears, and he was gone, and the Rebbe of Mailach accepted him. So that story goes along with another story that there was a story with the Kozhitzer Magid, that the Kozhitzer used to say like that whatever his tefillah was always accepted. And there were times where sometimes he used to just be able to say things quiet, and sometimes for really serious situations, it was like at night when he used to say tikkun chatzos. So whatever he asked for used to go. One night he's saying tikkun chatzos, and he says he sees like his tefillos are like bouncing back. So he sends some of the chaver around. You know, go see what's going on. There's something going on in the town that is not allowing it. Maybe there's somebody like doing like a big avera or whatever it is. So they go around town. They don't see, you know, there's nothing going on. Like, you know, the kretschmer, everyone's calm. There's nothing too crazy going on there. And then the guy haps upon a wedding. Now, what had happened was that, you know, the Ropshitzer had a very soft side to him also, despite his being an antagonist and trying to like call people out. He had that super holy sweet side to him. So he had come to a wedding, and he saw like the Kala like was just not happy. So he went over to her, he asked her like, what's the issue? She's like, I don't know, like, you know, everyone's dancing and there's drinking, but there's no like real simcha going on. So he's like, what do you need? You need a badchen? He's like, you know, I'm a badchen. He's like, tell me a little bit about this people, and, you know, this person, that person. And he starts with his badchanas, and the people are cracking up. Everybody's laughing. He's creating such joy at this wedding that like everything's crazy. So it turns out that when they come back to the Kozhitzer Magid, they tell him, you know, this was going on at the wedding. He's like, it turns out that everything in Shamayim stopped also. It was like whatever's going on down here stopped because of the pure joy that he was bringing to a chassan and kala, and it stopped everything. And it says, the Ropshitzer Maggid says, even the Eibishter was focused on this. Now, how we understand these things, obviously it's a Rebbe story, but it just goes to show that there are certain things that you can do to bring happiness, which is also like within, I think it's accepted across all of Yiddishkeit that we laned in the parsha today, or maybe we didn't lane. Some people laned, some people didn't, whatever, I can't say what's going on.
Yeah.
But in the parsha this week, if you really care about someone, which is actually interesting, maybe it'll segue into the fact that his sphera, what do you say? It's Hodshe Benetzach.
1 second, Abe. Before you segue, I just want to say that I heard the end of the story is that he was telling such good jokes that all the Malachim and Hashem, they couldn't stop themselves. They had to go hear his jokes, and they're rolling with laughter. That's how I heard the story. Anyway.
Right, that's what I meant. I wasn't,
Yeah.
So the truth is, before the segue, I wanted to go back. Why did I jump into that story? Because they say that story about the Rebbe of Meilach also, that it was with the Ropshitzer and the Rebbe of Meilach also. So I don't know which was the real story, but I wanted to just jump in one Yichus story, which was great. Reminds me that the Ropshitzer, you said before that he took his Yichus very seriously. So there was one time he was somewhere and he says, I have the greatest yichus, and he challenged, anybody has a better yichus than me, come and say it. So one guy comes over, and after everyone knew of R Naftali's yichus, this one guy comes over and he says, listen, my yichus is greater than yours. He says, no, tell me your yichus. He said, my father didn't put tefillin, his father didn't put tefillin, his father didn't put tefillin, and I put tefillin every day. So my yichus is greater. R Naftali said, you're right. Your yichus is taka greater than mine.
But then he continued and he said, but you know what the problem is with your yichus, that my yichus is better? He says, when you get up, tikkun chatzos, and you learn for 3 hours, and you daven and everything, and then you come to eat some food and you go, man, I'm doing such a high avodah, now I'm eating food, but you know something? I'm doing better than my father. I'm doing better than my grandfather. And you sit down to eat like a Baal Gaiva. He goes, but me, if once in a while I get to wake up early in the morning, maybe I'm Zaycha to learn a Daf Gemara. Maybe I could read a couple Tehillim, put on some tefillin. When I sit down to eat, I go, Naftali, you don't even come close to your grandparents. And I sit down and I'm still humble.
Yeah.
Before we go forward, I know that you want to get we want to bring up that Hodshe Benetzach, but you brought up you said there were 2 nuschas of when he met Rebbe Elimelech, and you only said one. Did you have another?
I'm sorry. So the second nusach was that the Rebbe of Meilach was saying tikkun chatzos. That's why I jumped in with the story of the Ropshitzer, because they say the same story.
And that's how he met Rebbe Melech.
No, also that he came, yeah.
Nice. So I heard
that's how the Rebbe of Meilach heard about him, and he accepted him as what happened was he had come to the Rebbe of Meilach. Rebbe Meilach kicked him out. He went out, and as he was strolling through the street, he ran into the Kala, the whole story with the Badchen, and the Rebbe of Meilach was saying tikkun chatzos, and then he called him back, and he said, no, you can come.
That's awesome. I never saw that connection, but I did hear another version to the Rebbe Elimelech when he met him. So I heard that when he came, and you could also be mitzaref like the story with the other one. It's like Shina Neschais. In the family, when they wrote things down, you have to get like the different svarim. In the back of Zera Kodesh, they have a Toldus, but then also like if you have like the Ropshitzer Haggadah, they got some extra story. You have to be malak it from the different places, and that's why I hear we're able to be mavar some of the ideas, and we'll have to I'm sure there's some Rubens out there, some Rubens and some Horowitzes that are going to be like, who are these guys? but we have the blood to prove. Yes, mister.
I'll tell you funny. I met a fellow Naftali Tzvi Horowitz He's a Ben Achaben from the Ropshitzer. You met me. We met him in Uman a few years ago. So he made a bar mitzvah probably a year later, and or not, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was a few months later, and he invited me to the bar mitzvah. I went with Shmili, and his grandfather, the Melitzer Rebbe, who was a Ben Achaben, was there. So I said, oh, well, I want to meet him, So I come inside, and he's only speaking Yiddish to me. So he says to me, he says, Naftali Tzvi introduces me as a Ropshitz Einikel. So he says, "Nu, how you Ropshitz Einikel?" I said, I don't really know how the yichus is. I could, but so he says, he looks at Shmili. He says, "What kind of yid doesn't have a beard and payas?" He says in Yiddish. So I said to him, a yid that's very undercover. I said, you have your avodah, I have my avodah. I can't necessarily wear beard and payas in my avodah, But it was funny. See, he had the sharpness, and I almost felt like, okay, in order to prove my yichus, I have to come back with
I gotta be
with something sharp.
I was testing you. Are you really a Ropshitzer Einikel?
Right.
What can you come back with, man?
Can you handle it? Can you handle the heat?
Yeah.
Give out.
I'll tell you how I know that we're real Ropshitzers, right? When my son Nati was born, you remember the story, right? When my son Nati was born, so people were making jokes about I was going to name him, maybe Glenn Fittich or whatever. I mean, Glenn is not such a, whatever. So Esti and I said, yeah, we're going to name him after a Rebbe. And I knew of Reb Naftali Ropshitzer. Esti's great uncle, Rabbi Heshi Mashinsky, was just nifter right before that also. So by the bris, after he was born, we decided, okay, we're going to name him Naftali Tzvi. Naftali for the Ropshitzer, and Tzvi for Uncle Heshi. At the bris, after we name him, and I'm sharing my speech, and I'm saying, yeah, he's Naftali for this, and Tzvi for this, and whatever. And one of Esti's uncles comes over, and he's like, the Ropshitzer's name is Naftali Tzvi. So I said, actually, I didn't know, but you see, everything comes from heaven, so that the kid's name is exactly what it was supposed to be.
Love it.
So, yichas ahi, yichas aher. Bottom line is that, yeah.
It's truth. It's the truth. Mamish. I'll tell you also, I know that we're Ropshitzers because there's not many people in the world that could make a joke and say a deep Torah and Mamish chop it on both levels and appreciate it on both levels. And you have to have some Ropshitz blood to do that. Like, some people, they need to either be serious or they need to be joking, but to be able to Mamish bring it together, they say the Sar Shalom of Bells, was good friends with the Ropshitzer. And I'm not sure if it happened with him or with his brother-in-law, but basically, one of the two, he either heard somebody else told him, said, oh, I'm going to tell you the secret of Misa. And so, he was like, but you have to go to mikvah, and da-da-da. So he did the things, and he tells him the secret, and he laughs, and he goes, oh. Then the guy walks out, and basically it was two people, two Rebbes. I think it was a Sar Shalom, and I think Reb Cheskel of Shinov, one of them married the sister of the other. I'm not sure I'm getting this right. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it's something like this. And so basically they're brothers-in-law. And when he comes out,
Chatzkel Shinover was the Divrei Chaim's son?
No, Reb Chaim of Sons? No.
Yeah. No?
Okay, I'm getting confused now. I don't know. I'm getting confused with the lineage. We'll have to look it up. Maybe we'll get on Wikipedia or something.
Who needs a Wikipedia? I got all the info here.
So basically, so when he finally gets the story, he's like, wow, what was the secret? He goes, oh, it's a joke. He goes, when I was by the Ropshitzer, we were peeling potatoes, me and another guy, and the Ropshitzer comes out, we were peeling potatoes over the big barrel filled with water. The Ropshitzer smacks water in our faces, smashes our heads together, and tells us a joke, and that's how we understood the secret of Nishika by Misa. Because by the Ropshitzer, in one little joke, Kalach Ayad, he would give us Mamish Ilamas. By the way, that Indian, it says that after the Ropshitzer got married for the second time, so he was living in Dukla by his in-laws. And during that time, he was mamish doing a lot of barchanas, and by all the poor weddings. And he would go there, he'd pretend to be throwing shots back, and he would pour it all over his body, and it would freeze. There are all these stories about it. Anyhow, his father-in-law was not into it, and he didn't chap the avodah. So he sent a letter to Reb Mendel of Linsk, the Ropshitzer's father, and says, I don't know what to do with him. You know, I thought I married a Talmud Chacham, and now he's standing on tables making jokes. Like, what's the deal? And so Reb Mendel comes with his wife, and they came. And he said, when's the next, poor person's wedding? And they came. And so Reb Mendel's hiding behind the door, and he hears the Ropshitzer. He's doing Gramin, Alpida Aleph Beis. And after a few minutes, the Reb Mendel turns to his wife and says, we're going home. It's all good. So she says, what's going on? He says, up to the Aleph Beis Gimel Dalet Hey Vav Zayin Ches Tes Yud, those stanzas I understood. But after he got past the Yud, Gevalt, I have no hasaga in what he's saying. He goes, he's just fine. Don't worry, we'll leave him be. Like,
interesting. It's interesting because there's a Rebbe in Harnof who married into a Ropshitzer family, Ropshitzer Enikel, and also people he's connected. People he also jumps up on tables and makes crazy jokes and crazy stories, and a lot of people don't chop him, but I think he's mamish the deepest of the deep.
Big Rebbe. Yes.
Those who know, it's so true. So I'm very with you on that one. So let's go back to when they came to Rebbe Elimelech. And by the way, I think this also shows that Rebbe Elimelech chopped the Ropshitz Inyan also. So when they say when the Ropshitzer got there, like Abe was saying, when Ropshitzer got there, Rebbe Elimelech was not accepting him. So there's another nusach that says that Rebbe Elimelech said, "Oh, you're the son of the murderer. You're Ben Haretzeach. Get out of here. I don't need people like you." And the Ropshitzer was like, "What? The son of the murderer? Like you're gonna knock my yichus?" And then he says, "What do you want? What's the issue?" He goes, "I don't take people with yichus." And all the people told him, Rebbe Melech did not take anybody with yichus. So like in this line, he's knocking the yichus and calling his father a murderer or something. Finally, Reb Naftali's on the floor and he's begging, and he's like Abe said, he's mamish blood coming out of his throat, and he's crying and sobbing. And no way, just because I have yichus, you're not gonna take me. What? I should lose out just because I have yichus? That doesn't make any sense. I give up on my yichus. I don't need it. I'm just me. And he begs Rebbe Elimelech, "What do you mean?" So Rebbe Elimelech says, "I'll tell you what happened. When I was traveling in Galus with my holy brother Reb Zisha, on the end of our Galus, we came to the city of Linsk. And in Linsk, we went to the Rav, and he brought us in and he gave us food to eat, and he was very nice to us. And when we left, he gave us a donation, but we noticed that we had more money than any of the other poor people. And we figured it must be a mistake. So we went back to him, and we went to this private room. We said, and knocked on and said, "Can we just ask the Rav? Like, it looks like you gave us too much." And so Reb Menachem Mendel, the Ropshitzer's father, looked at them and said, "I know who you guys are. You think you could hide yourself from me?" And he says, "But you should just know that if I was in Gullus for as long as you guys were, I would be on a much higher madrega." And they walk out, and they're like, "Oh no!" So they decided to do another year of Gullus because of that. And Rebbe Elimelech called him the son of the murderer because in that year they mamish hit a new level of bittul hayetzer. And he said, like, his father's like mamish, he helped us murder our Yetzirah. So like Kubi over there, like, he used that line, like, you have to be a Ropshitzer to see a line like that, When in Ropshitz.
Wow.
Yeah. But Kavalt, you should know that they say that even the Kajnitzer Magid said about the holy Ropshitzer, about the holy Reb Naftali, that you should know nobody in the world could learn the Naim Elimelech like Reb Naftali. But don't be surprised, because after Reb Elimelech died, he came and he learned every single day with Reb Naftali, and he taught him the whole Naim Elimelech even after he died.
Hello.
Hey, Batsheva. Good morning.
Hit that
I'm going
pause.
to jump out for a second. I'll be right back.
Hit a pause. Let's take a little break.
Gewalt. Yeah, the Ropshitzer was a crazy, unique tzaddik, and he was okay in his own shoes. That's for sure. I think also
ultimately all the Rebbes understood his chachma. They used to call him a chacham. However, like from a lot of the stories and let's say a lot of the information, let's say from Eli Wiesel has a great piece that he writes about him in Somewhere a Master, and he talks about how the Ropshitz are connected to so many different Hasidic masters. He would connect on the deepest levels. There's like a story with where one time I think he was by the Rizhiner, and the Rizhiner also called him like a big chacham. And so one time he was there, and the Rizhiner asked him like, "No, they say you're a big chacham. Tell me a story. Tell me something that's like deep wisdom." So he tells a story about how one time he fooled a guy. I don't remember exactly what the story was. Somehow he pretended he was some relation to Meir Balanes, I think, and he goes to this guy and he fooled the guy. And this is the story that he's telling the Rizhiner, that he fooled this guy, and they took the money from the guy, and they went and they bought booze. So the Rizhiner and the Ropshitzer start laughing, and nobody understands, like, what's the joke here? Like, what am I missing? And we still don't know. We still don't know what the joke. We don't know what was going on. It was on such a high level that the Rizhiner said to him, Naftali, I knew that you were a chacham, but like this, I didn't realize. Like, what was the story? What was going on there? There's so many other stories that I've read about him that also are like, just makes you wonder, like, what was the depth of this man? What was the depth of this man? I mean, there was, from that story that I said before about whether it was with the Rebbe of Mailach or with the Ropshitzer, about his laughter that he created. The Rebbes used to say, with what I can do with tears, you can do with laughter. And that was one of his chachmas. That was one of his depth, the depth of what he embodied.
Yeah, and it's true. He was sharp and he was witty, but he was beyond. I mean, it feels like a bechina of Yitzchak, of Midas HaGevura, of just being in a space beyond. Yeah.
That is interesting. The Gevura and the laughter together.
Yeah. I'll tell you, it's interesting. There's a couple of good stories about when he bumped into these different like Perushim. There are different people in the community, and we can get into it. Like, I don't think that we're shying away from any of the tough or uncomfortable parts. So there were definitely some stories about like you see him how he dealt with different people in the community. There was, I think it was Reb Tzvi Hirsch of Zidichev. Reb Tzvi Hirsch of Zidichev was the Meshares before he became Rebbe in Zidichev, right? Okay, I think so. I think that the year after his Rebbe died, he spent a year by the Ropshitzer, and the Ropshitzer wasn't Makar of him. And Reb Lezer of Jikiv, one of the Ropshitzer's sons, was like, "Why aren't you being Makar of him?" And he said, "Well, I'm not, because he has his avodah, like, I know that he has to be able to go and become his own thing, but you should go and stand by him." And later, after the Ropshitzer, I believe, was Nifter, Reb Lezer of Jikiv went to go visit Reb Tzvi Hirsch of Zidichev, and when he came, the Gabbai said, the Rebbe's resting. So Reb Lezer of Jikiv stood outside the door and said, "Can I bring you a chair?" Because Reb Lezer was hush of a man. He says, "No, my father told me that Reb Tzvi Hirsch, he's worth it to wait outside his door for him." And he stood there waiting until he woke up. So I think that there are things like, so what was I saying? So Reb Tzvi Hirsch, during that time, he used to, the Ropshitzer would walk around and like with his talis over his shoulder and check out all the Hasidim as they were davening. And like he wanted to see, like, he would check everybody out. And then afterwards he said, Tzvi Hirsch, he deserves to dance because he's going to be a big Rebbe one day and he's going to be giving off shade to the whole world. He says, but looks at one of the other Hasidim and goes, "But you, a waste on your shoes. You're wearing out your shoes too soon. You shouldn't down so much. Like, he was harif. Like, don't, Abe, you had a story with one of the Prushim, one of the ascetics who would fast all the time.
Yeah, there was a story where there was a guy who, like, he wanted everyone to know, but without knowing, without him saying it, but he wanted everyone to know what he was doing. So one time there was like some young boys in the shul, and I don't know if he maybe nudged the guy into the other guy, and he says to him, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you pushing this guy? You know who this is? This guy fasts every Monday and Thursday." And the guy turns around and he says, "What fasts every Monday, Thursday? Fast Shabbos to Shabbos."
Boom.
Busted.
Yeah.
It's actually very interesting. I was reading that, the Divrei Chaim, right? You were talking about peeling for him. So the Divrei Chaim was known also to be by him and peeling potatoes. And the Divrei Chaim said that he never called him Rebbe. Why? Because he's like, I never learned anything from him. He's like, what I got from him, he says he was just too profound for me to learn anything from him. He says, what I got from him was his Yirah Shamayim. He's like, I was around him only for his Yirah Shamayim. And that I can get out of peeling potatoes for him.
Wow. I heard another nusach to that story also, where he said, they asked him, because Reb Chaim would call a different Rebbe, my Rabbi Umairi. And he was only by him for 2 years. But the Ropshitzer, who he was by for years, he would call the Zaken, the Rav HaZaken. So they asked him, he said also, like, what's the deal with the Rav HaZaken? So he said the similar, and he says that, this other Rebbe, I was able to download, but the Ropshitzer was so high, he said that even the Yud from Yirah Shamayim, I didn't even get. So like, I'm still working on that. He said, but my mom was like, and I've got everything from him, but yet I'm not even up to the Yud of his Yirah Shamayim, so I can't call him a Rebbe, because he's too far beyond me. There's another story, by the way, about an ascetic also who came in, and he came into the Ropshitzer, and before he came in, he pulled down his he had like sackcloth under his shirt, and he pulls down his sackcloth a little bit so the Ropshitzer should see it. And everybody called this guy label of the fool, label of the tippish. So he comes in, and the Ropshitzer looks up, and he chop what was going on, and he goes, "Oh, he's mamish, not a tippish." Like, he's mumbling to himself, "Mamish, not a tippish." And so Reb Leibel looks at him and he goes, "Is Rebbe talking about me?" And he goes, No, I'm talking about the Yetzirah. The Leibel goes, "What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, if he managed to convince you to climb into a sack, he is not a tippish." He was sharp, he was strong. They say at the end of his life, when Reb Lezer Levjikiv asked him, he said, "Tata, why are you not talking so much?" And so the Ropshitzer said, "Because my whole life, I have always spoken on multiple levels, making yichudim and having multiple meanings." And he says, "But now that it's hard for me, I'm like, on my last legs, it's hard for me to do it. So I'm just not talking." And so he would motion a lot with his hands. And I think it just shows the greatness of such a man who was able to encompass so many worlds and so many levels. They say the Ropshitzer, he would be able to do in his yichudim, he would close his eyes and recreate the whole world in his mind without, or different from like, let's say a Yidla came in and he had an issue, and he could recreate the whole world in his mind and then come out without that Inyan, or with a new Inyan, and that's how he would recreate Ilamas. And he was a master. He was an absolute master. And they say that the only thing that he let them write on his tombstone is Yachid B'dar B'chachmas Alikim. And then it says, and we're not allowed to write anymore because that's what he said. And the fact that he allowed it, that's also him. That he allowed them to write Yachid B'dar B'chachmas Alikim, but not anything else. He was real with himself. He knew his value.
Very, very interesting that in the Ma'aras HaTzadikim, so this there's a fellow that puts this out where it has the different stories and yahrtzeits every week, So he writes in the story that they actually added a line. They added a line on his matzeva, and that there's a crack. And he says this is the last wise crack ever from the Ropshitzer. When you see a picture of it, I've never been there. I haven't been there yet, but there's a crack right through where it says this. I don't remember what it was. I'm going to see what it was.
That's the crack.
Right, where it said, the crown of our heads, master and teacher, the holy Rav. And these words were not part of the nusach that he wanted on there. Oh, could you read the nusach?
Yeah, it says, the crack goes right through Harav HaKadosh HaMeforsam.
Yeah.
Oh, is it showing up backwards?
No, it's showing up forwards. It's just hard to see.
So I can read you. I'll read you the matzeva. The matzeva says, Poin nitman v'safon ish alekim niftar be Yud Aleph Iyar Shnas Tafkuf Pei Zayin Asher al Zed Dava Libeinu v'chashcha Yinenu Oyna Lanu Ki Nitla Teres Reishenu Adnenu Marenu v'Rabbeinu Rav HaKadosh HaMeforsam Shal Shelas HaYuchzin Yachid B'Dairoi B'Chachmas Alekim V'Yesar HaShavachim Ein Lanu Rishus Ki Kein Tzavinu Mipiv Harav Marenu Harav Naftali Tzvi Av Beistin Tekilas Ropshitz Ben Harav Hamaforsim Marina Menachem Mendel Av Bezdin Tekilas Lisk in Ishmas Etzur B'Tzorah Chaim. And so that part where it says Adonai Marina V'Rabbeinu Harav HaKadosh HaMeforsam. So it says Harav HaKadosh HaMeforsam. You can see that in the thing. Boom. There's a crack running straight through it.
So cool.
Zchuto yagen aleinu v'al kol ha'olam. Amen v'amen.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. May we be blessed to mamish connect to the Holy Ropshitzer and to all the tzaddikim and Gewalt. This has been amazing. This has really been amazing, and let our words hopefully bring a nachas ruach to all those that hear it, and hopefully the Ropshitzer is happy with what we're doing.
With his Zera Kodesh.
Wow.
They say that he named his sefer after his children. His sefer is called Zera Kodesh. They say it, so. What's up? Name the book after me.
L'chaim. L'chaim.
L'chaim. L'chaim.